Welcome to Aquarium Divers for Coral Society's Turn the Tide with Volunteer campaign. I'm Mike Anderson. I am the founder and president of ADFC. Working behind the scenes today, we have Elisa Leonard, one of our board members that's going to help keep everything running smoothly. We will answer these questions in our Q&A at the end of the presentations. A little bit about ADFC. We are a nonprofit founded to help foundations do coral restoration underwater. We voluntarily do this. We also take time to help and educate the general population, the general public, as well as the dive community and our members. We're now working with 7 different foundations. We're adding an 8th foundation next week in Cozumel. This summer, we'll be working with 3 foundations. One is in Key Largo, that's the Coral Restoration Foundation, iCare in Island Murata, and Reef Renewal USA in Big Pine. In November, we'll be working with the Reef Renewal Foundation, Bonaire. Once again, that's where we started 4 years ago. In 2025, we will be adding the Island School in the Bahamas, and in 2026, we hope to be able to work with Plant a Million Coral in the Florida Keys. The larger our organization becomes, the more members we have, the more that we can do. 5 top reasons for joining ADFC. One is it's free to join. Everyone likes free. How do you do that? What we do is we do fundraisers to cover our basic operating costs. You get to dive with like-minded people who are want to use their diving skills to help give back to the ocean or to the coral reefs. We also have 2 different types of trips. We have trips that are recreational with coral restoration included in that trip. And then we have trips that are missions, where the whole week is spent doing coral restoration underwater. So you could end up with, like 20 dives for the week doing coral restoration. This topic, or this campaign, Aquarium Divers for Corals, Turn the Tide with Volunteers. Our reason for this is that last summer we were working with 2 foundations in the Florida Keys. This is the summer of 23. We found ourselves in 95-degree water. We found ourselves working with coral, or looking at coral that was bleached, bleaching, or dead. This was a major setback to the reef because of the heat of the ocean. Later, we worked with the Reef Renewal Bonaire, Foundation Bonaire, and that was October. And that same heat wave had reached them. They had massive bleaching, and they had mortality. ADFC came to the consensus that these foundations doing coral restoration need help. If you put all the scientists together, they're not going to be enough to turn the tide. So what we need are volunteers. Where do you find those volunteers? Well, there are hundreds of dive clubs across the United States. If 150 of those dive clubs took one of their existing trips a year, or 2 of their existing trips a year to wherever it is they're going, and they included coral restoration in that trip, that becomes an army. So if you're going to the Florida Keys and you work with iCare and you volunteer with them, you get to do dives and you get to do coral restoration. So that's how we can build an army. And you spread that over the year. If you had 150 dive clubs do this over a year, that's your army. That's the help that they need. So in this, after the end of this presentation, what we're going to do is send, well, in a few days after this, we're going to send you information on contacts, who to contact, the foundations that are doing this. You can share this information with your dive club and try to encourage them to look at the trips that they're doing and include coral restoration in the trips. If the dive club is not interested in doing that, what you can do is yourself, you could join ADFC, or if you have a few dive buddies, you can work with one of the foundations that we'll have in those lists. Today we have iCare from Island Murata, and we have Reef Renewal Foundation Bonaire. From Reef Renewal, we have Katie Risa, and from iCare, we have Mike Goldberg and Dr. Kylie Smith. And what I'd like to do right now is turn it over to Katie from Reef Renewal Bonaire. So live from Bonaire, in the moment, what's going on, Katie?
So much for that introduction, Mike. I'm Katie. Thank you so much to ADFC for having me. I do communication and development for Reef Renewal Bonaire. That means I'm in the office a lot, but I also get to be in the water a few times a week, which is the perfect balance if you ask me. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Reef Renewal Foundation Bonaire, what we do, why coral restoration is so important in Bonaire, especially right now. That's what I'll start off with. And how you can get involved, and really how over the last 10 years or so of our organization's history, volunteers have been really, really important to us. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Everyone able to see the full screen? Stop me if not. So, yep. Perfect. Thanks, Alyssa. Just to start off, unfortunately, we're seeing, and it's going to be a bit of a quick presentation, by the way, so I hope I don't go too fast. Essentially, we're starting to see a lot more of this site in Bonaire. If you talk to a lot of fishermen or just folks that have been in Bonaire for the last or over 30 years, a lot of them will say even just to enter the water anywhere around Bonaire, you would have to break coral or really like step over coral. And unfortunately now in 2024, in the last 5 decades, we've seen a lot of decline in that coral cover. So this statistic, which is very rough, is over half of the coral population has declined. So why is that? We could spend this whole presentation talking about that, unfortunately, but for one, storms, hurricanes have definitely becoming, been increasingly unpredictable, happening with increasing severity. Lots of diseases. We'll talk about stony coral tissue loss disease in the next slide. Loss of sea urchins, specifically the long spine sea urchin here in Bonaire. Sea urchins are really important grazers on the reef. They eat algae and essentially make space for new coral recruits. And then bleaching due to any number of stressful conditions for coral, whether that's heat or pollution. I like to just show this slide. So this is an example of a really beautiful, beautiful groove brain coral colony suffering from stony coral tissue loss disease. And you can really just see how, one lesion can essentially result in the death of this huge, beautiful colony in just a matter of months. These pictures are actually from one of our amazing volunteers. So essentially, what do we do? What does Reef Renewal Foundation Bonaire do to assist the recovery of coral reefs? So we have 2 major techniques. Sorry for the noise here, guys. We have 2 overarching techniques for coral restoration, and they both kind of take advantage of the natural reproductive processes of coral. So on the left, we have coral fragmentation. And then on the right, we have larval rearing, or also called coral breeding or larval propagation. It's really what we want to do with both of these techniques is increase the genetic diversity of the coral that we are putting onto the reef. So via fragmentation, that process starts with nursery trees, and these look quite a bit different for different species that we're working with. We work with 12 different species. 10 of those can be found in our nurseries. So a variety of branching coral, like staghorn and elkhorn, 3 species of boulder coral, and actually no, 9 species of boulder coral. Okay, I'm gonna have to do my calculations again. But essentially the trees for each species look quite different depending on their morphology. So they spend some time in our nurseries until they're big enough to be outplanted. Again, the techniques really vary depending on the species here. We just started incorporating cement for our boulder corals and our elkhorn corals, and we've seen really great results with that. Although it sounds a little uncouth, it's actually been able to withstand some recent weather events, these corals that are outplanted using cement. We also do some wedging and a few other outplanting techniques, but essentially we grow corals of many different genotypes in our nursery and outplant them. And then we really closely monitor our outplantings, and especially genotype by genotype, just to kind of see which genotypes respond differently to stressors like heat events or disease. So just a few examples of some of our outplanting sites. This is Jeff Davis, just a snippet of this site. These are all outplanted staghorn corals that were outplanted about 8 years ago, and now the area is over 1,000 square meters. An example of elkhorn, this is at a site called Oil Slick Leap off the northern west coast of Bonaire. So essentially we have these nurseries and outplanting sites all up and down the west coast and a couple on the east coast. So a lot of numbers here, and each of these icons can be anywhere from 6 trees to 60 trees. Our biggest nursery is off of Klein Bonaire, which is that tiny little island off the west coast of Bonaire. So in the last 11 years that we've been around, we've really been able to accomplish a lot. So I'll tell you why in a bit. But I just also wanted to go over our coral breeding program really quick. This is quite a busy slide, I know, but essentially our coral breeding program really takes advantage of the sexual reproduction of corals. And again, we're just really trying to facilitate more genetic diversity on the reef as sort of a longer term solution, or not solution, but approach to these more and more stressful conditions that corals are facing here in the Caribbean. And this is just one, also a little example of our coral breeding program, a success. This is a larvae post-fertilization, and just 1 year later on what we call our seeding substrates, also called ninja stars by some of our volunteers. And like I said, we do quite a bit of monitoring, but I'm just gonna breeze past this slide so I can get to the important parts. Like I said, we've been able to accomplish a lot. We have nurseries and restoration sites all around Bonaire. We've outplanted so far, this number is now about 60,000 outplanted corals. We partner with different dive shops, and they help us train our volunteers. And right now we're at 14 dive shops and counting, of course. At any given time, our nurseries can hold around 20,000 corals. And those numbers just give you really a general estimate of how much we have been able to accomplish with the help of our volunteers. So we have in Bonaire a really thriving volunteer program where essentially how it works is our 14 different dive shops can offer a course. It's called the Reef Restoration course. And it's specifically meant for Bonaire, so it can only for now be taken if you're coming to visit Bonaire and diving here. And essentially it's mutually beneficial both financially for the dive shop and for reef renewal, and also in terms of labor. Just by doing the course, you're making a huge impact on the reef. You are learning how to maintain a coral nursery, how to prune coral fragments, how to outplant coral fragments, and sometimes even install new nursery trees. These things take a lot of work and a lot of time, and Reef Renewal Bonaire has, from 2012 to 2018 was only 2 people. It was always my boss, Francesca, and someone else that was just, interchanging. And so really the way that Reef Renewal Bonaire has made the impact that we have around Bonaire is because of these people who, thousands of people who have wanted to donate their time and energy. And it's just a really, really great way to get involved while you're on vacation, or if you come here. ADFC has done a number of trips here, and just really, really helped us out, bringing a lot of people, a lot of divers who know what they're doing and have their heart in the right place and really want to help us out. So essentially, like I was saying, you can take it's a PADI distinctive specialty, but we also offer it through SDI. So PADI or SDI, if you are certified open water, you can take this specialty with us. It's 3 dives. It lasts about a day and a half to 2 days to 2 full days, depending on the dive shop that you take it with. You do have to pay at the dive shop, but again, some of that goes towards us, and I think it's for a really, really good cause. And so essentially, after you finish that course, you become an official Reef Renewal Foundation Bonaire volunteer. And you can hop on our boat not anytime you want, but whenever we're having a volunteer dive. So whenever we go visit any of our nurseries, whenever we need to install new nurseries, we have sort of our list of volunteers who can help. Whenever we need to go out planting, different specific missions as well. So yeah, and these are the 14 dive shop partners. And now I'm looking at the time and realizing that I absolutely blew through this presentation. That is just about all I have, but I really just want to emphasize that, you know, we are always looking for volunteers. And even though we've had a few thousand folks come to the island and help us out so far, you know, we want that family to grow. And it sounds cliche and a little cheesy, but it really is the best part of Reef Renewal Bonaire, I think, is all the people that come and help us out and seeing what other people get out of it as well. And I would love to take any questions in the Q&A after Mike and Kylie go. If anyone has any questions about Reef Renewal Bonaire, what we do, the science behind what we do, but most importantly, if you want to get involved, super happy to help. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for listening, and thanks to ADFC for having me present.
Thank you, Katie. One thing, just to put in a plug, ADFC is fielding a trip of divers to Bonaire in November. It's the 9th to the 16th, and there's more information on our website about that trip.
Perfect. Can't wait to have you.
Can't wait to get there.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Mike? You're muted.
All right. What I'd like to do now is turn the floor over to Kylie and Mike Goldberg. So I don't know who wants to start first. So Kylie, you can start.
You guys are muted.
I am trying to share my screen and it gave me a error message. So let's try this again.
Did Katie sign off of okay.
Here we go.
Yay. All right. Can everybody see that? Okay,
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming this afternoon. My name is Kylie Smith, and I also have Michael Goldberg on the call, and we are the co-founders of iCare. And we're going to kind of split the presentation, so you'll hear me talk a little bit first, and then I'll switch it over to Mike. So we are a coral restoration group focusing our efforts in Islamorada, Florida, which is kind of in the upper middle Florida Keys. Let's see here. Get my screen to, okay, so we're focusing in Islamorada, Florida, and if you've never been diving here, we have some amazing dive sites, especially when it comes to the fish life. We've got turtles, sharks, hundreds of different fish species, but unfortunately our corals are not doing very well. I know Katie touched on coral decline and the many reasons for it, but here in the Florida Keys, we now have an average of 3% coral cover on our reefs. So you may or may not know, coral reefs are incredibly important. They support up to 25% of all marine organisms at some point through their life cycle, which is incredible given that corals take up less than 1% of the ocean floor. The corals provide structural complexity and food resources for a lot of those organisms, and they also help out human populations by supporting global economies and protecting our land during storms. So coral reefs can absorb up to 97% of energy that comes in with a hurricane. And so the reef is really crucial to protecting our homes and businesses here in the Keys. So like I said, and like Katie mentioned earlier, our corals are declining, and this is happening really quickly. So this is a coral head. It's a mountainous star coral at Alligator Reef, one of the iconic reefs here in Islamorada. This is in 2015, and this is that same coral head in 2019. And so one thing that we started realizing is that people were coming and diving and snorkeling on our reefs and looking at this picture on the right and thinking, oh, what a beautiful system. This is so pretty. Not realizing that the coral's dead. So a big thing that we wanted to do at iCare was to educate the general public about what a healthy coral reef should look like. And so what do we do? So there are several different coral restoration partners here in the Florida Keys. And what we do a little bit differently from the rest is we partner with local dive shops, and we train their customers in everything they need to know about coral restoration, and we put the corals in their hands, take them out to the reef, and let them be an active part of the restoration process. And this has been such a great way for us to educate both visitors and our locals about what a healthy reef should look like. So I do have a little video here. Hopefully it will play for all of you, just to give you an idea of what this looks like. So we partner with 3 main dive shops. No matter which shop you use, you start out with us and our team doing a demo, and it gives you a chance to use all the tools you're going to use above water before we take you underwater. Then our team goes down and we supervise the divers as they transplant the corals onto our reef and interact with some of our fish life, which you'll see kind of checking us out. So we transplant 10 different species, including staghorn, which you primarily see in the video. We're also working with the sister species of elkhorn coral, several species of brain corals, and here recently we've been able to work with some new coral species like the spiny flower coral, cactus corals, and even finger corals. So hopefully that kind of gets you excited, wanting to come down and get your gills wet a little bit. And so we are out planting corals all the time. We run trips every Saturday and the 3rd Sunday of every month, and we bounce between different dive shops. We work a lot with educational groups of all ages and dive clubs from all over the place. So we are able to book private trips depending on your group's needs. And again, no matter which dive shop you use, we have one location where we will do that training, and it's about a 2-hour training with our crew. We've also have the ability to expand to kind of some more of these multi-day workshops. So we also will run a maintenance program where divers can come and help us do maintenance on corals we've already put out, like scrubbing algae or making sure our corals are secured to the bottom. We also have some reef community survey dives that we can do. So our team monitors the rest of our reef community, and so we wanted to bring some of those activities to our divers, including we can go out and do surveys of our invertebrate communities. We also get coral predators. So this here on the bottom is a bearded fireworm, and they are huge predators, especially on our staghorn corals. And so we will run night dives with our groups to go out and collect these guys, which is always super fun. And so we have a lot of really great partners, especially when it comes to where we get our corals. So iCare does not grow our corals. Instead, we rely on our partners. And I want to talk about one in particular, Moat Marine Laboratory, because they are an incredibly important partner for us. They provide us with the majority of our corals, and they do some amazing science behind the corals that they grow. And so they get their corals using a process known as microfragmentation. They take a larger colony and we run it through a bandsaw to create a coral fragment about the size of your finger. I'm sorry, of your fingernail. And then we glue them onto these ceramic pucks and we put them in a nursery to grow. And these fragments grow faster because the coral has a similar response to if your skin gets a cut, it triggers a growth response and it grows faster to try to heal. Hey, Mike, could I ask you to mute? I'm getting a lot of feedback from you. I'm so sorry. Thank you. And so the same thing happens with these corals. All of the different edges are cut, and therefore it's going to grow faster. So then Moat also does some experimental manipulations with these corals, and they put them through something called a chaos system. And what this does is it ramps up the temperature and drops the pH of the water to levels we anticipate will be on the reef in 20, 30 years from now. And so it's only the corals that survive these experimental conditions that get outplanted onto the reef. But Moat doesn't stop there. They also do something called assisted reproduction, where they will take the sperm from one strain of coral that say is good at dealing with that higher temperature, and they'll mix it with the sperm of another strain that's good at dealing with increased disease prevalence. And they will crossbreed them to create new genetic strains, or what we call genotypes, that are more resistant because they have those stronger characters of their parents. And so we are really trying to hedge our bets and put corals out that have the highest chance of survival. The way that we outplant our corals, especially looking at our bouldering corals, we use something called a reskinning method. So we take advantage of all those old dead coral skeletons that are out on the reef. We go out, we scrub them, and we glue these little plugs out onto a coral head. Now, these guys are able to grow much faster because they don't have to create their own skeleton. Instead, they literally skin over their dead ancestor. And so these guys are able to grow a lot faster because they're able to put all of their energy towards growing that tissue out. Now, when we outplant these, we try to make sure that every plug on a coral head is from the same parent. And so as these corals grow and the tissue meets, it will actually merge to create a larger colony because it recognizes that it is itself. It came from that same parent colony. And so in just 2 years, we're able to grow corals that naturally may take anywhere from 5 to 10 years for it to get there on its own. And so I do have a quick example of some other coral species that we've worked with. This is a Cropra palmata, or our elkhorn corals. Our divers outplant these guys in plugs of 5 to a cluster. And here at 2 months, you can start to see some fusion, especially in those top 2 colonies. And then by 12 months, you can't even see the fragments anymore. The bases have completely grown over, and we've started to see these really pretty crowns coming up towards the surface. So it's been really fun to watch these guys grow. And we would love to have our divers come back and see the work after they've been able to grow. And so the overall goal of coral restoration is to not need restoration anymore. And so we want to create populations that are able to reproduce and sustain themselves. Well, Moat did that. So in 2015, Moat transplanted a coral using this reskinning method, and it spawned just 5 years later. And why is this so incredible? For this species in particular, it can take decades for it to grow to a size where it can reproduce on its own. This coral did it in just 5 years. So coral restoration can work, and it's something that we are definitely still in this fight. And so talked a lot about Moat, shifting back gears to eye care and kind of what it is that we have been doing. So we're a relatively new organization. We have been transplanting corals for about 3 years now. And in that time, we've transplanted over 15,000 corals from 10 different species. But another way I like to measure our success is the number of people that have come through our program. So we've educated about 3,000 people. And those are people now that are stewards for our marine environment and have gotten active with our program. We do work at 6 main reef sites, but we range from shallow patch reefs to deeper spur and groove. And because we work with the dive shops, we are able to go out on windier days to our deeper sites to escape some of that surge. And so one thing I wanted to dedicate a little bit of time to was what happened this past summer. So I'm sure everybody in the diving community heard that the Caribbean and the Florida Keys had a major heat wave this past summer. So every year, we tend to get warmer water temperatures that kind of happen towards the end of those summer months in August and September. And a lot of times that will trigger coral bleaching. It got incredibly hot this past year. We started seeing increased temperatures as early as July that lasted through October. We had water temperature up to 90 degrees for 3 solid months. And so that triggered a mass bleaching event. We did see signs of this bleaching in our staghorn and elkhorn corals, especially on our shallower sites. We had some paling in our bouldering corals, but our sites are recovering. So I'm happy to report that we do have some survivors. Rocky Top is our shallowest site. We did unfortunately have 100% mortality of our staghorn coral at this site, but in looking at our bouldering corals, we're sitting at about 90% survival of those guys. At Alligator, where we put all of our elkhorn coral, we're sitting at at least 77 of our colonies are alive. We still have some of those staghorn corals alive there too. At our deeper sites, we didn't see as much bleaching. We saw some paling. We're still collecting some of our data, but we do have at least 50% survival in our staghorn corals. So we're learning a lot from this. We're figuring out which genetic strains we want to be able to focus on moving forwards and which species we want to really focus our restoration efforts on. So that's all that I have. I'm going to go ahead and throw this over to Mike to talk about what we've been doing next.
So where do we go from here? We recently started a project where we're collecting corals of opportunity. These are corals that broke free from the main reef. What happens during bad weather, storms, corals break free naturally, and they will roll over, polyps down into the sand. So if the corals go down into the sand, those polyps will die. They get smothered. It doesn't take too long, a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, and sadly those corals die. So what we have to do, and what we recently received permits to do, is to go out onto the reef, collect those corals that are broken off. And you can see in the left where we've collected the corals, we put them in a lift bag. They're quite heavy, quite big. And in the right, you can see Dr. Smith. She is actually cutting up in that beginning phase, was cutting up some great star coral, and there she is cutting up some brain coral. This is the first I've seen the video, actually. It's a great video. Anyway, so we cut those up, and what Kylie was saying, cut those up into about a thumbnail size. And what we're doing is using these corals to repopulate nurseries. We're using them as brood stock, and we then also use some of those coral fragments to go and skin old coral heads like Dr. Smith was talking about earlier. What's really amazing about corals of opportunity is that these corals are tough. They are amazingly tough. They survived during coral tissue loss disease. They survived bleaching. They survived black band disease, white band disease, everything we've thrown at them, and they still survive. So we know that these are corals that we need to use to rebuild our reefs. And that's exactly what we're doing with these corals. We did this 2 weeks ago in just half a day. The corals that we took off the reef, we made just over 1,500 fragments after just 2 days of collecting corals. Next slide. We also have a sponge restoration program. We don't just work with corals, we look at the entirety of the reef and look at what is needed. And we all know sponges are important to the reef, that goes without saying. But sponges provide an important feature or function. They stabilize the reef. They actually create like a glue to the reef. They filter water, they provide food, they provide habitat, and what's really neat is that after this past summer, when we were in the midst of the intense bleaching event, our sponges did exceedingly well. They didn't pale. They didn't, in some cases, some species in the Florida Bay struggled, but out on the reef, the sponges that we outplanted, they were fusing to the bottom and they were living life the way they're supposed to. So it was really, really cool to see. This is a partnership that we have with Florida State University, where we will train you all and get you up on sponge ecology. We will then take you out in the afternoon after a morning's training session. We'll take you out in the afternoon and we will transplant sponges. We have the world's only and the world's first in water or in situ sponge nursery, which we erected just about a year ago. So we're quite excited about this. And again, this is another program that you all can get involved with. If you decide to come down to the Keys, we can introduce you to not only corals, but sponges as well. Next slide. So how do you get involved? Well, to start, of course, you want to check with ADFC, get involved with one of their programs. They have a couple of weeks that they're coming down here to the Keys. Of course, they're going down to Bonaire, jump on one of those trips. If those don't match up with your schedule, we are running trips every weekend and additional trips throughout the summer as well. But every Saturday, you can get involved with one of our programs. Of course, you can follow us on social media, sign up for our newsletter, donating, of course, go onto our website, icareaboutcoral.org. But you can also sign up for our second annual trash derby. So last year we did our first, we collected over, just short of 13,000 pounds. This year I decided that I'm to charter 15 boats, almost every dive operator in the Keys, from Key Largo all the way down to Key West. What this means to you is that you can come down here May 3rd and May 4th, and you can dive for free. So that's on us. We covered the cost of that. All you have to do is go on to icaretrashderby.com, go onto that website, register. Whether you want to dive in Marathon, you want to dive Key West, you want to dive Key Largo, you can pick the location. If you have a specific dive shop that you want to dive with, you can find that dive shop on the website. Pick the dive shop, register, it's free, come on down. Help us clean up the reef for a couple of days. We have a fabulous festival where you can win all sorts of cool stuff. We've got Garmin computers, Mara's dive gear, Scuba Pro gear. You have the opportunity to win all of these just by participating. You can volunteer. If you don't want to dive and you just want to help out on shore, we can do that as well. And for those that are inclined, there are still sponsorship opportunities. We're happy to take money to help us out in our endeavor. But it's a great weekend. It is the largest dive event ever in the history of the Keys, and we're happy to be doing this to help us draw awareness and attention to the issues out on the reef, as well as raising money to rebuild the reef. Last slide. That's all that I have for you all this afternoon, depending on where you are this morning. Does anyone have any questions for us?
So I've got some in the chat here. And if anybody has some more questions, please put them in here and we can field them to all these presenters, these great presenters. And we at ADFC, if you haven't joined our organization, please get on the website and hit the join button and do so. It's free. And we're going down with a group to do diving with Mike in June and also again in August. And we'll be working also with the Coral Restoration Foundation in June. And in August, we will be with Reef Renewal USA. So great opportunities. All right, any questions? Let's see. So I do have one. It was on the fees. So people are asking, how much does it cost to get certified, to go through your program, Mike, or to go through yours, Katie?
I can go ahead and start, because I know this is a pretty common question. For us, a lot of people want to volunteer out of the kindness of their heart and kind of have trouble with the fact that you have to pay to take a course before you volunteer with Reef Renewal Foundation Bonaire. I don't know about iCare, of course. But you do have to pay, I believe, depends on the dive shop, but it's around $200 for the course. It's kind of in the realm of other PADI specialties. I know that's a bit pricey. There was just sort of not a way for us to get around that with so many people that are wanting to help. I think the course is one of the ways that we sort of standardize our procedures and have the capacity to train more people, because at the end of the day, Reef Renewal Bonaire is only just a few folks, and our instructors at the dive shops, also at our partner dive shops, help us train. And a portion of that fee also goes to us as a donation. So after that, after you take the course on Bonaire, essentially we put you on our list, and there's no fee for if you want to volunteer 50 times after that and help on our boat. So that is quite a common question. I'll throw it over to Reef Care now. Sorry, I care.
I'd like to add something to that, is that with ADFC, we've been able to negotiate with the different foundations that our members will be able to use their certification from one foundation to go to another, which doesn't normally work, but they've agreed to do that. So lots of times we'll do that and make a donation to that foundation rather than paying the whole course. And if there's a difference in technique or methodology, what we'll do is audit the course at that other foundation that we're volunteering with from the one that we trained with, so that we can learn the different techniques and be valuable to that other foundation also.
For iCare, the cost is $25 over the cost of a 2-tank dive. Literally that simple. Just $25 over the cost of a 2-tank dive.
Yep.
And we are looking, right now, we're working very hard on some grant proposals. And one of the things that we're trying to do is offset some of the costs for our ADFC divers to cover some of the costs of getting those certifications, and also on some of the diving costs as well. So we're trying to make things as affordable as we possibly can, so that we can get more divers in the water, more divers certified, and more coral restoration work done. Let's see, other questions. Oh, I had one for you, Katie. I didn't know that there were nurseries on the east. Every time we do these presentations, I find out something new. How, I know the ocean is much rougher on that side. How do the corals do in the rougher conditions?
That's a great question. The corals do great. It's more of a question of staff going to install and maintain these sites.
I imagine.
So we have 2 nurseries in Lac Bay, which is quite a bit calmer than sites up the East Coast, but still gets a bit more surge, especially when there are surge events, storm events. There's a few big natural colonies of staghorn in Lac Bay that we did collect our parent brood stock from for those coral nurseries. Unfortunately, we did just that oil spill in Trinidad and Tobago. Also, besides storm surge, that oil did make its way into Lac Bay and the east coast of Bonaire. So that was another stressor and something to think about that didn't hit our nurseries on the west coast. Fortunately, though, all of our corals are doing fine. It was a small amount of oil that made it past the barriers. But yeah, that was just a note about some different things, you know, kind of getting hit from all angles in the last year or two. I'm sure iCare agrees.
But doesn't Lac Bay is fairly shallow, so doesn't it heat up?
Exactly. So then, you know, we got the tail end of that bleaching event in the summer that Kylie and Mike were speaking about a bit later on. But we had a pretty widespread bleaching event here and in Lac Bay, where it is quite shallow, and our nurseries are at, we have a horizontal nursery at about 3 meters, and then vertical rope nurseries at 5 or 6 meters, and they're actually cut in half because it's so shallow there. But the water got to like 31 degrees Celsius, which is quite high, and we saw a lot of bleaching and some mortality in those nurseries. So yeah, it's sort of a trade-off, you know, and during that bleaching event, we moved a lot of our boulder coral trees, our boulder coral nursery trees, into deeper water on the west coast. So they're sort of our tray nurseries, because our branching corals here have a bit higher of a heat tolerance than those boulder corals. But again, then when they're in deeper water, they don't grow as fast because they don't have the access to sunlight as they would at shallower depths. So it's a bit of a trade-off any way you look at it. But we were lucky enough not to, it wasn't as intense as it was up in Florida, of course, temperature-wise, and we're quite lucky for that.
All right. I know Benny has a question for you, Mike, about dive waivers, medical dive waivers, but that one I think you might want to just take individually.
Which Mike? Which
What's
Mike?
that?
Which Mike?
Oh, no, Benny Henderson.
No, he's asking.
Oh,
the-
gosh. Yeah, there's two
which
Mikes.
is he asking the
Michael
question?
Henderson, or Henderson.
No. You said he's asking a question to Mike, right?
You,
Oh, okay. That's fine.
about medical waivers. So I
All
just said, I think you probably will want to take that one individually.
Yeah, that would be better. We'll have to
Okay.
take time for that, right?
And then we don't have any more questions in the Q&A, but if somebody has a question, if you raise your hand and you want to ask directly, that would be fine as well.
We must be very thorough.
Right. Or if you want to ask a question about any of the ADFC work or trips or that sort of thing, we're happy to answer those as well. It was
Well,
great to have you all here.
yep. I can add that we are looking forward to seeing the methods that they're using in, I won't be there, but we'll have a team in Cozumel next week. And I can't wait to see what they come back with as far as the methods that they're using there, which seem to be a little bit different than everybody else's. So that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn as much as I can, and I'm certainly going to take lots of pictures and video. So,
I think you have another question.
oh, okay, from Russell. How will the links be sent to give to our local dive shops? So I guess that's for you, Mike Anderson.
Wait, say again, God is reading somebody else's question. Sorry.
Russell, do you want to explain a little bit more? You should be able to unmute.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
In the beginning of the call, you said there would be links that you would send to us and we could give this information to our
Right.
dive shop
Right.
if they
So,
want to participate as a shop.
yeah. I hear multiple questions there. One is we're going to be providing links to all the foundations that we work with. We'll provide contact for the people who you should talk to. Like we'll be, like we'll have Kylie and so forth on that. You said you're a dive shop. Did you say, Russell? You said you are a dive shop.
No, I'm sorry, but I'm here in the state of Maryland, so I use a couple different dive shops. And in the beginning of the call, I thought there was going to be information that we could give to the dive shop if they wanted to participate.
Okay. We're focused right now on dive clubs. We're going to have another phase of this where we're going to focus on dive shops so that the differences that the dive shop need to be able to see how they can involve their clients and make a profit at it. So it's a little different approach for them than a dive club. So
Gotcha. I misunderstood. I'm sorry.
right.
We
So
will
that
have information that he can share with the dive.
right. So
We
you
can
can
share it
tell.
with a club or a shop or whoever, but we're going to actually focus on dive shops.
Right.
It's kind of a second phase of our Turn the Tide with Volunteers, because yes, we would love for people to join us and be part of ADFC, and people can do in tandem. They can be part of a club and be part of us and do both. But we just want more people certified, more people in the water helping and doing this work. And if that means a dive shop puts on their own trip, fantastic.
Right. So what I would recommend, because we've done joint trips with the dive club, with a dive shop, and it's a different ball game. So what I would recommend is that if you get the information from us and you share it with your dive shops, that I think it would be better to have the dive shop connect with iCare, or have them connect with Reef Renewal Bon Air, like say Buddy Dive or one of the other foundations or one of the other dive shops down there, and do it that way. Because Mike has key dives, and
Mhm.
the shop can come down and dive with key dives and do coral restoration, or go directly to iCare. And the same thing with Katie, you could direct them on who to contact.
Well,
Matter of fact,
I've already spoken to Key Dives for me personally, but like my local dive shop, they just finished a trip in Bon Air, and then one of the newer clubs, well, they went to Cozumel, but they're planning on going to Bon Air next year. And there's a lot of divers that are, here in the Maryland dive community that would, even though they use these dive shops, I'm sure they would love to hook up, maybe even do something to help with the cause while they're there on that trip.
Absolutely.
that's the way to do it. So
We're looking
if
for.
you would, if you know where they're headed, to which resort they're going to use, and that resort is one of Reef Renewal Bon Air's sites, they can take the course. I would arrange that before they get there.
Right.
And they can take the course, and it doesn't have to impact the entire vacation. If they're going for a week, it'll tie them up for a day and a half. And if a person wants to do more than that, the neat thing about Bon Air is that you can access their from shore. So you can, once you're certified, you can work with that dive shop and go out on an afternoon and do more coral restoration under the guidance of that dive shop.
And you don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be staying there. We have a lot of dive shops that we work with. So even if you're just staying on a normal hotel or Airbnb or something with your group, you could, as long as you get in contact with one of our partner shops, and I'm more than happy to help you out if you have some questions or just want to know which shops we partner with. I think Mike Anderson and Alyssa, you guys will send our contact information around to everyone who participated in this call. So happy to help, Russell.
Sure. Appreciate it. I'll pass it on.
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. That's why we're doing this.
Thank you.
Well, that's all the questions I have here. So I guess we don't want to hold up everybody for the rest of the afternoon here, but if anybody has more questions, you can contact us, and we will be sending out information with links and names and places and all of that stuff.
So
to get you connected.
there's another question there. Bernie, you were asking about, is it possible to get what's the question there? I lost it there.
Oh, is it possible to
No.
get coral to learn with and grow on our own?
That we're spread out. ADFC is spread out. We're like in 8 different states, so it's not going. We'd have to do it virtually, and no, I don't see that working. Mike, you don't do anything virtually as far as learning, right? As far as like
Not with
training.
physical coral, no.
No. So
Obviously we do virtual trainings. I think someone asked another question, that they were working to set up an exhibit in their aquarium where they volunteer. I don't know if you guys saw that question.
Yeah, that was Benny's. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So maybe
yes,
they can reach out to us, and we can work toward creating some type of exhibit in a local aquarium. That's something we might consider doing for sure.
So, Benny, which aquarium? Benny, which aquarium are you with?
Oh, you're
You can
muted.
just reach out to us. You can
Yeah.
just reach out to us directly. And
Because-
then we can give us an idea what it is that you're trying to create or what you'd like to do. And we'll see if that's something we can facilitate.
Right. Yeah, because some aquariums already, like Adventure Aquarium, has a whole exhibit on coral because we're one of the aquariums that is involved with the AZA's Florida Reef Track project. And so we have a few hundred coral that came from 2014 or 2015 when they were pulling corals out and flying them around the country. So Aquarium, Adventure Aquarium was one of the first ones to take them in. So we have a large exhibit on display there, educating people about the coral. And then we have, you know, our grow tanks upstairs in the shark realm under artificial light, and it's very interesting. And they're working now on doing getting the coral to spawn under the lights and without the new normal cues that the coral will get. So it's pretty interesting, and it can go to that level. It depends on what the aquarium wants to do.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us, everyone on this call, and iCare and Reef Renewal Foundation Bonaire, Kylie and Mike and Katie. It was great to have you.
Yes, yes. So this has been recorded. So like we can share this with the people, with anyone who wants to share it with others. And also we'll share it with the people who registered and didn't sign up. And I mean, they signed up, but they weren't able to show up.
To be here. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Great.
I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it informative. Yeah, this was like a mission to pull this off.
Yes. Yep. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. It was a pleasure.
All right.